Hey everyone, my name is Chaos Drive and I've been making games as a hobby for about 6 years now, although I typically have a hard time seeing them through. But I recently started a game that I'm pretty excited about. It's going to be a cyberpunk themed metroidvania with a large focus on story. And I've decided to start a devlog series to show my progress and just kind of create a community around the game. I've always enjoyed watching devlogs from other indie game devs on YouTube, so I thought, why not give it a shot? Before beginning, I thought I would list my main inspirations for this game, just so you all have an initial idea of what I have in mind. My biggest inspirations include Hollow Knight, one of the best Metroidvanias to date, Katana Zero. I really like the overall aesthetic of this game, and the music is top-notch. Of course, Cyberpunk 2077 is on this list for obvious reasons. Tarnishing of Juxtia. This is another Metroidvania with amazingly satisfying gameplay. I really like how smooth and natural the player movement and combat feels. And Blade Runner 2049, one of my favorite movies. I really like the cyberpunk visuals and music. I'd also like to mention that these devlogs will consist of many things, such as the art process, music making, coding, and concepts. The beginning ones will mostly be coding with a bit of art, just because I'm trying to get the main systems of the game working. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get started. For the first devlog, I'm going to be focusing on player movement. I know it's boring, but it's the most fundamental part of a game, and it needs to feel satisfying. So I've got a couple things I've already coded, along with some basic animations, such as idle, running up and down slopes, jumping, ledge grabbing, and this cool little dash move. This is a really good start, but there are a couple things that are missing. One of these things is one-way platforms. Platforms that allow the player to jump through while they are below, but they will collide when above. This can be seen in almost every platformer game ever made, so I got to coding. This was one of the more simpler things to add, so it didn't take me very long. Most of the art in the game right now, besides the player, is placeholder art, so for the one-way platforms, I just kinda colored a pink square. After a bit of coding, I got it working, and here's what it looks like. Nothing special, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. If I'm above it, I can collide with it like a solid object, but if I'm below it, I don't, so it allows me to jump through it. Also, if I press the S key while on top, I can voluntarily fall through the platform. It was looking good. There was just one issue. I couldn't ledge grab the platforms like I could on the regular solid objects. So, back to coding. This was a little more confusing than it sounds because when the player ledge grabs on an edge, his Y value is just below the edge. But when the player is below a one-way platform, the platform is not supposed to count as a solid object. So I had to do a little problem solving and workaround. After a couple of trial and errors, I got it working. The player can now ledge grab at any point on a one-way platform and jump up onto it. Now that that was taken care of, I moved on to the next mechanic, wall sliding. I wanted the player to be able to slide down walls at a slower speed than he would normally fall. Before starting the coding process though, I hopped into Spine to animate a wall sliding pose for the character. I'm using Spine for most of the main animations in my game. I find it really useful and I like the modern style it brings to the pixel art. After finishing a short, repetitive wall sliding animation, I exported it to GameMaker Studio where I started the coding process. This was a little more complicated of a mechanic for me to implement because it clashed with the ledge grabbing. I had to make sure that the player doesn't try to wall slide if he's trying to grab the ledge and whatnot. It took a lot of messing around with the values and I eventually got to a point where it felt smooth and natural. Here's how it looks in-game. If the player is facing a wall, he starts to slide down it at a slow speed. It turned out pretty good. I also made it so when running into a wall and jumping, you gain a little momentum up the wall before sliding down. Right now, this is all it is, but it leads into the last mechanic I wanted to add in this devlog, wall jumping. Wall jumping is a very satisfying way to get around in platformer games. It's a mechanic that the player might not need to use very often in this game, but it's nice to have the freedom of movement. This actually took a bit of time to implement as well. I wanted to make it so when the player jumps while wall sliding, the game will turn the player around, jump, and then push them far enough away from the wall so that if they were to try to get back to the same wall, they would end up lower than where they jumped off. I don't want the player to be able to climb up a singular wall using wall jumps. He needs to have the back and forth motion. After a lot of playing with values and methods, I got it working smoothly. Here is a successful wall jump in-game. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the player movement. I'd say it was a pretty successful devlog. I got a lot done and have a solid foundation for the game. I know there was a lot of coding in this video because I'm getting the basics down, but I'm going to try to vary the content of the devlogs as much as I can going forward. This was devlog number 1, and for those of you that made it to the end, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in devlog number 2.